The first presenter is Jessica Grahn. Our first presenter is Jessica Grahn from the Department of Psychology at Western University. Jessica Grahn is a world leader in cognitive neuroscience of music. She investigates why we move to rhythm and how movement and rhythm are connected in the brain. In addition to using brain scanning to understand how motor areas in the brain respond to different types of rhythm, she also examines how rhythm and music affect those with dysfunction in movement areas, such as Parkinson's disease and stroke.
It is a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about my research on musical rhythm, and specifically why it is that music, but not other sounds in our environment, can compel us to tap or nod along, sometimes when we aren't even aware of it. To demonstrate this behavior, I have some 9-month-old twins who show us just how incredibly early it develops. Because movement to music emerges very early in development, because it's universal across cultures, and because it requires zero training, this suggests that movement may be fundamental to our capacity for music. And what is it in the music that makes us move? The key feature is rhythm. You can strip away the melody and the harmony and still get people's toes tapping with a simple drum beat. This is what I try to understand in my research. Is our brain's movement or motor system intrinsic to our human capacity to perceive rhythm? To examine this, we use magnetic resonance imaging machines to measure brain activity while people are listening to rhythm, but not actually moving along to it. What we find is a whole network of brain areas respond to rhythm. Not surprisingly, we get auditory cortex or sound processing areas right next to the ears because people are listening to a sound. But all of the other areas that we see are part of the brain's motor system, including the supplementary and premotor areas and a core motor area deep within the brain called the basal ganglia. Now, we see these motor responses for everyone, regardless of whether they have musical training. But people often wonder, what about musicians? Do their hours of focused training lead them to have greater brain responses, or do they barely have to switch on their brains when they hear rhythms? And the answer is yes. Often musicians have more brain activity, but it's hard to interpret. That's because when musicians come out of the scanner, they're often wondering whether I'm going to sit them down and say, now, I know you've worked your whole life on your music, and everyone thinks you have a promising career ahead of you, but I have seen your brain activity, and I'm afraid you just don't have what it takes. So we don't know if the increase in brain activity that we see in musicians is related to their enhanced rhythm processing or because of all the extra cognitive resources they bring to make sure they do well on the task. Another thing people often ask me is, my partner has 2 left feet. They wouldn't know a steady beat if it hit them over the head. What is going on in their brains? This is an active area of research in our lab. We actually test people's ability to feel the beat by asking them to listen to music and tell us whether the beeps are on or off the beat. You can try this now. Now, if you said those beeps were off the beat, your brain activity might look like this. We see that people who tend to perform well in detecting the beat have more activity in their brain's motor areas. Now, this neuroimaging data suggests that indeed the motor system is very responsive to rhythm. However, it's possible that people are imagining moving to the rhythm, and that's what makes their motor systems light up. So to truly know if the motor system is key, we need a causal method, and brain stimulation gives us that method. Here, we run a very small 2 milliamp current through the brain to safely alter activity in the motor system. When we run the current one way, the brain area under the electrode is excited and the motor system neurons fire more easily. When we run the current the other way, they are inhibited and the motor system is suppressed. If the motor system is truly involved in our rhythm ability, we should see that people's performance on rhythm tests increases when we excite the motor system and decreases when we inhibit it. And that is indeed what we find. When we excite people's motor systems relative to no stimulation at all, we find that their performance on a rhythm task improves. And when we inhibit their brain's motor systems, we find that performance is worse. So if rhythm is so intrinsically tied to our motor system, can we use this power for good? Maybe to help increase or normalize motor system activity in those with movement disorders? This is a question we're investigating in my lab, where we focused on walking or gait. as gait is one of the most crucial activities we have for daily living. And we focused on a particular population that has difficulty walking, people with Parkinson's disease. Now, Parkinson's disease arises from dysfunctional activity in one of the key areas we saw light up earlier when people listen to rhythm, the basal ganglia. Patients may have trouble initiating movement, or they have slow speed or short steps. So what we want to see is if we can really improve that speed. To measure gait, we use a pressure-sensitive mat, which automatically measures their gait patterns without us having to attach any wires or anything else to them. What we want to know is what features of music enhance gait the most. And today I'll just touch on two that we've looked at. One is groove, by which we just mean, how much does this music make you want to move? High groove music is usually up-tempo with a clear beat. The other factor is enjoyment. Is this a song you love or one you hate? Now, here's one of our tireless participants, along with my former graduate student. Here, we find that groove actually makes a big difference to how quickly people moved. Listening to low groove music slowed them down compared to a silent bass line, represented as 0 here on this graph, whereas high groove music actually sped them up. Enjoyment, however, doesn't make much difference. This suggests that somehow the music is getting into our motor systems whether we like it or not. In the future, we hope to be able to combine the approaches I've talked about here, using our understanding of how every individual's brain responds to rhythm, coupled with brain stimulation technology to enhance those responses, to further optimize outcomes for those patients that have movement problems. Thank you for listening.